Good morning, everyone. The clock on the wall says it's 10:37 on February 15th. My name is John Martin, Chairman of the Development Committee, and I call that committee's meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
God, that man is lucky.
Seven.
Huh?
You said 10:37.
Oh, 27. I'm sorry. I can't read the clock on the wall.
Brown,
Brown here.
Berman,
Here.
Ford,
Present.
Iqbal,
Present.
Kenyon,
Here.
Wonicky,
Present.
Fraz, Caius,
Present.
Heerog, Shepro,
Shepro present.
Martin.
Martin present.
You have a quorum.
The first order of business is the approval of minutes from January 18th. May I have a motion, please? Ms.
Wonicky moves.
moves.
Brown.
Mr. Fries seconds. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Brown,
Brown, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Iqbal,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Wonicky,
Yes.
Fraz,
Yes.
Caius,
Yes.
Martin.
Martin, yes. I have a procedural question. I see Mr. Shepro is on the line. If we have all committee members physically present, do we need yet to have can we vote by unanimous consent, or do we still call the roll? I guess I don't have Mr. Shepro, so we're going to vote.
I think you have to call the roll anyway,
Okay, thank you.
as
Monthly
long as it's on
financials.
Zoom.
Okay, monthly financials are available to you. If you have questions, please direct them to the finance department. I see we have a couple of people signed up for public comment. I believe they are both applicants, and I'm going to assume, unless they say to the contrary, that they are here to answer questions at the point in time that their petition is up for consideration. Am I correct on that point?
Yes, from Michael Bryant.
Okay, then we'll proceed. The Building and Zoning Division, please make your monthly report.
Good morning, Mark Van Kerkhoff, Director of Development. Very pleased this morning to be able to tell you our new code compliance officer, building inspector, who you met last month, has hit the ground running, is doing a great job working with our team, both on building inspections and complaints. As the weather warms up like we're going to have tomorrow and people start getting outside again, we always anticipate that our number of property maintenance complaints will rise. So we'll be prepared for that. Also just want to mention, because I don't always mention it, in part of that compliance process, we had great support from our state's attorney's office. Our first level of working as a staff is to work with people to get into compliance in a reasonable time frame. If that doesn't work, we take them through our adjudication hearing process. But there's always a handful of cases that even that doesn't satisfy compliance, and we end up having to work with the state's attorney's office. And we have probably about half a dozen cases that they're working on right now, and we greatly appreciate their support. With that, there later on in the agenda, there's sort of the 2-year plan and goals. So I'll defer the rest of my comments until then, unless there's any questions.
Are there any questions of Mr. Van Kerkhoff? Hearing none, may we move please to petitions, the first being petition 4585.
Okay, good morning. Your first petition this morning is 4585. This has been before you before. We discovered as it was in process that there were some special setback and distance requirements. So it did go back to the zoning board for hearing, additional hearing on a variation to the location of the landing strip relative to the Aurora Airport. So this is requesting a special use in the F farming district for a private landing strip for up to 2 planes. This is the property located on the 2040 plan. It is in the area designated for agriculture. You can see North Aurora further to the east, and then Lake Run Forest Preserve existing open space. Here it is on the zoning map. You can see it's an area predominantly zoned F district farming. There is a cluster along Norris Road there of some very large lot residential properties, some zoned F1 and a couple zoned E2. And again, you can see North Aurora as the area hatched in the red. Here it is on the aerial, and you can see the areas zoned F are predominantly being used for agriculture. And then you can see the pattern of the other residential and agricultural structures along Norris Road. Next slide, please. Oh, I've got the control. Here it is in a close-up. The subject parcel has an existing single-family residence close to Norris Road. Here it is again closer up. Most of the property is being used for agriculture or has a drainage area. This is the Plata survey. This is the updated site plan locating the proposed airstrip in a location that meets the setbacks required in the ordinance from Norris Road. Here is another stipulation in the ordinance in terms of the relative density within a certain radius, 2,000-foot radius of the property. And then you can also see the setbacks illustrated relative to Norris Road. Just for your reference, these are some of the special provisions in the zoning ordinance that we discovered and had to go back through the process again. So the one that required a variation was there's a requirement that it be 5 miles from any regular airport. So it's not real specific on whether it's to the property or to the runway. We went ahead and measured it from the property line of the subject parcel to the closest runway at the Aurora Airport, which comes to 4.19 miles. There is a precedent for granting an exception or variance to that requirement. This was back in the 80s for private airstrip to the west of Aurora Airport, which is 2.21 miles, and that variance was approved back in the 80s for a similar special use. Staff recommended stipulations. There's a number of them from Water Resources. If you have any questions, Jody Wolnick is here to respond to those. Have to do with mostly with the construction of the airstrip if this were to be approved. Transportation originally had a right-of-way requirement, which they have now withdrawn from as a requirement for this. So there is no right-of-way dedication requirement. And then we did contact the air traffic manager at the Aurora Airport regarding the regulations, and they don't have any issues with the airstrip. So Regional Planning Commission was not applicable. Zoning Board of Appeals, even upon their re-review, recommends approval of the special use and the variance with the recommended stipulations. It's before you this morning. We did learn at their meeting earlier this month, the Village of North Aurora had a resolution regarding this petition, and Dale Berman is here this morning, and I'll ask Dale if he'd like to comment on their resolution and the contents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Can we, I don't think we have a motion. All right, second. Fraz moves,
I'll second.
Winnicki seconds. Comments, Mr. Berman?
Yes, Berman here. The Village of North Aurora is objecting to the approval of the private landing strip. And I'll read a portion of the resolution. The property is located within the Village of North Aurora's planning area and is relatively close proximity to residential properties located in the Village of North Aurora. And the Village Board and trustees have determined the proposed landing strip will interfere with the orderly and harmoniously planning and the future development of the area. In its best interest of the village of North Aurora to oppose the special use to allow a private landing strip on the property under question. I thank you very much, and I would certainly support North Aurora resolution.
Frost.
Yeah, this is in my district, and as you all know, this is, I don't know if we've set a record for a number of times, something was tabled and brought back, and mostly over just technical issues. And as Mark said, KDOT has signed off on the one big issue we had. And yeah, we did receive North Aurora's comments just recently, so this is new to us. I think one of the tough things in this is a grass hobby airstrip falls under the same term airport, as the Aurora Airport or O'Hare Airport. So, the word airport is kind of a scary thing, but this is a grass hobby strip limited to 2 very, very small planes. As you can see on the graphic that's up there, there's a huge area of forest preserve between the closest North Aurora house and this strip. I would imagine if you're that closest house on that cul-de-sac, you would never know anything was going on over here. So, and also the neighbors, the immediate neighbors have all supported this petition throughout the entire process. There's never been an objection from anyone nearby. So I strongly support it and recommend approval.
Nikki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm certainly in favor of approving this. It's gone through committee quite a number of times. I'd like to see it move forward, but just a quick question for Mark. Do we have anything in our records that limits the size of the airplane that lands there? Any kind of details like by, I don't know, by engine or size or anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of. It would be limited in size and by the construction of the airstrip. So just being a grass airstrip itself would limit that. But if the petitioner's online, maybe if you'd like to respond to that or even volunteer a stipulation as to a restriction on the size or type of plane.
Good morning, Council. Colin Anderson. I'm here appearing on behalf of David Giordano, the petitioner. I'm his attorney at law. Unfortunately, he thought the meeting this morning was at 9 a.m. and so he had a doctor's appointment at 10. That's why he's not here. So if you wouldn't mind, I can absolutely address that. The airplanes that would be used on this are ultralights. So they're very small airplanes. I can't get into the technical know-how because it's above my head. But we would absolutely stipulate that the only ultralights would be there. And that's consistent with the Illinois Aeronautics Act and other regulations that restrict the type of airplane that can be utilized on a small landing strip like this. And as stated, it's a grass hobbyist strip, so it couldn't even support any sort of a larger aircraft. Like I would, just sort of thinking out loud, such as a Cessna or anything like that. So any restrictions that the committee believes is necessary, Mr. Giordano would stipulate to.
Thank you.
That being said, if I could ask for an amendment to the stipulations to include ultralights, then we've addressed that issue and we can continue with other questions. Madam Chair, go ahead.
Yes, how about noise and air pollution? And what about leakage of gas or oil that may interfere with water, with the ground?
Ultralights are extremely small. I mean, they're too small. I'd never want to get on one. They're like lawnmowers with wings. So it's not, there won't be like airplane. Oh, I don't want to address it as an advocate. I'm just saying that they are very small. Drew?
Yeah, no, again, as I said, ultralight doesn't even have a body on it. It's essentially like a hang glider with an engine. So these engines are very small, 2-cycle or small engines. And I'd say debating that would be like debating whether somebody could buy a riding lawnmower or not.
Okay,
Berman.
Not a factor.
Berman.
thank you.
Mr. Berman?
Yes, Berman. This is the first time that it's been stated they're ultralights and not a winged airplane. And I think it makes a significant amount of difference if we're talking about an ultralight or a wing type airplane. So
I think, as Mark said, just the nature of a grass airstrip. I know, for example, up at the Bruner property in Elgin, there were some pretty big planes lying on a grass airstrip. So you're correct. But yeah, this is a very, very small airstrip for ultralights. So if they're willing to, I'd be happy to make a motion that this airstrip be limited to ultralight type aircraft.
Let's add, I think Mr. Brown's our last comment.
Yeah, I do, Mr. Martin. Thank you. Brown speaking. Mark, could I ask you, during the process of that the county goes through, when do we notify the villages that would have a jurisdictional authority of planning?
Sure, we notify them at the same time as all other units of government and adjacent property owners and property owners within 250 feet. So it's at the very beginning of the process. So they were notified originally when this petition came through, was heard the first time by the zoning board and consideration by the development committee. And then they received additional notification when it went back to the zoning board for the variation relative to the Aurora Airport. So, and it's at this point in time that the Village of North Aurora put a resolution on their agenda objecting. So that's
Thank
all
you.
about it.
Thank you for that
I'm gonna
answer.
State the facts.
I guess my comment on this would be, I did receive this resolution also from North Aurora, and I called and I talked to the village administrator. And their concern is simply that they don't want an airport, airfield, air landing strip, whatever you want to call it, within their planning boundaries. To Mr. Drew's, or to Drew's comment, the people to the east would probably not even know that there's a airstrip there. I think North Aurora's concern is their future planning as well. There could be additional houses that could be built somewheres in that planning area that would know that there was an airstrip there. And then I think the ultralight provision brings up a whole new conversation, because now instead of a airplane landing once or twice a day or a week, as I envision it, ultralights are kind of a hobby thing where they take off, they fly around, they come back down, they take off, they fly around, they come back down. So they could be, in fact, even be more of a nuisance to the neighbors, because they don't take off and fly high, they take off and fly low. So they could be like a bee buzzing around the neighborhood day in and day out. So that's a whole new conversation if we get into the ultralight thing. But I'm going to stick with North Aurora. There's a reason why we notify them. There's a reason why they meet and discuss things like this that are being proposed to within their boundary or within their planning agreement. So I'm not going to support this at this time.
Are there any other comments, Madam Chair?
I have a comment on behalf of the petitioner.
Excuse me, just a second. I've
Um,
addressed, or
this
we
is-
have a knowledge of the chairman right now.
The location is pretty close to I-88. Are they restricted from flying around at I-88?
I have no idea.
there's no restriction.
No more than any other aircraft.
Do they have a certain height restriction? Because ultralights, I was just, I'm looking it up right now. I don't think that they can go very high because it seems to be an open air.
That's
Broad
right. You're
front.
sitting on a lawn chair.
Mhm. I'm just, if that was going to be a danger and annoyance. And then ComEd has got a training center right down the street from them as well. So I'm not, I agree.
Let's-
I had no idea it was going to be this kind of plane.
Yeah, I
Then-
think, okay, excuse me. Mr. Anderson, did you ask to speak?
Yes, if you don't mind. Since we're getting into the technical aspects of this flight, I think it would be appropriate for the petitioner to be present so he can answer some of the more specific questions. I would note that the initial application materials for this did identify light aircraft as being the type of aircraft that Mr. Giordano intended to utilize the airstrip for. To sort of address the other issues, we need to understand that in this agricultural area, there's crop dusting every single season. So this is an area where there's even larger airplanes doing precisely what the committee's concerns are, which is buzzing low to the ground, flying up and above. So I don't think the type of light aircraft that Mr. Giordano is going to be or desires to use would in any way impact or cause any additional annoyance whatsoever. To address North Aurora's resolution of objection, I will note that Mr. Giordano's proposed special use remains consistent with Kane County's development plan, which is my understanding is to maintain the agricultural landscape of the area. North Aurora's objection also is based on its prospective, not yet approved development plan to rezone this agricultural land and develop it for residential. So this prospective plan is entirely inconsistent with Kane County's actually stated development plan of preserving the agricultural landscape. Furthermore, I think that North Aurora's concerns are not yet right because in addition to not ever even having approved this plan, again, it's a prospective plan that North Aurora is basing its objection on. But if they ever actually approved that plan, wouldn't they need to come before this body and seek to rezone the currently agriculturally zoned area that we just discussed and we can see? They would need to seek to rezone it from agricultural to residential, in which case at that very time they would have the ability to seek to rezone Mr. Giordano's proposed special and or revoke the special use and or variance. So I think that their concerns may become valid in the future should they be able to rezone this area, but I don't think they're there yet. And I don't think they should sway this body away from approving a hobbyist special use with minimal impact on the area. So thank you.
Comment,
Mr. Fries.
Shepro?
Mr. Fries?
Blair, could you back up one or two slides to show where it shows the forest preserve in more detail? Yeah, that's the one. So, a municipality cannot jump over a forest preserve, as I understand it. I suppose they could go north and up and around, but the chance that they're never going to own that green space. And they would have to buy all these horse farms on Norris Road to annex there. So I think that's a real long shot. But I'd also like to add that that's Bliss Road where Norris intersects there. On Bliss Road, just about a mile north of here at the Polo grounds, they have a real active paraglider, paraplane, I guess you call it, club. And that's very similar, but instead of wings, they use a parachute, but they have an engine and so forth. So that's been operating for probably 15 years up there. So very small hobby grass strip for ultralight planes. I would personally prefer to call the question on this, but
Yeah, I don't mean to unfairly diminish the conversation, but if this was a pot of stew, we've cooked it long enough that the meat has turned into mush and the vegetables aren't recognizable as such. So I agree that,
That's pretty demeaning.
what?
That's pretty demeaning of the
Well,
conversation.
then I apologize for that perception, but we have talked
Okay.
a long time about a pretty innocuous piece of property, and the issue before us is fairly clear. So I think it's appropriate that we do in fact vote, but we do need to amend. We have not yet entertained the amendment to the conditions.
Fraz speaking, I will make an amendment that we add the fact that these would be ultralight, categorized ultralight aircraft being used on this property and limited to that type of aircraft.
And Ms. Winnicki,
I'd
I
like
think
to second that.
you will add that to the
Absolutely.
procedurally now. Have we amended the motion properly, Mr. Shepro?
Bates, please.
Yes, Ms. Bates.
I will try not to cook the stew any further till it's off the bone. Forest preserves like Lake Run are not nothing. And those areas need peace and quiet for the animals and the hikers and the people seeking peace and quiet in the forest preserves. I live pretty close to the Aurora Airport, And I don't know if it's student flyers or what, but sometimes we get buzzed overhead. And it's very hard on people's quality of life to have airplanes buzzing around over the head. This is not the same thing as somebody buying a lawnmower unless you're flying that lawnmower over somebody's head over and over again. And I think we should respect North Aurora's wishes as well. But I'm not on your committee. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Are we ready to vote?
Mr. Chairman, Alan,
Ms. Allen?
I'll be real brief. I just wanted to take advantage of the fact that Mr. Anderson is online here. May I ask the question, are you required to get some kind of letter in writing from Aurora Airport in order to achieve the variance? And could you also provide that to us if you have not already? Thank you.
I believe Mr. Burkhout can address this as well, but no, Aurora Airport, there's no legal requirement to obtain their permission. Nevertheless, they were notified about this, and it's my understanding they have put in writing to Mr. Burkhout that there is no objection. They've got no problem with it. There's obviously another landing strip that's even closer to the airport than this. We're about 4.9 miles away from the airport. There's one, I believe, within 2 to 3 miles of the Aurora Airport. So they have stated an email that I have seen that they have no objection, that they are completely fine with it.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Certainly.
Mr. Fries?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Fraz speaking. I just think it's also important to note, based on maybe his comments, that the Forest Preserve has been noticed on this since day one and has not had any objection.
Okay.
Berman.
Let's
I have a question.
Mr. Berman.
Is there a statute that says that an ultralight has to have a landing strip? And the landing strip has to be approved by the county?
Is that question addressed to me?
Who just spoke?
I don't know if there is an ordinance saying that for an ultralight, you have to have an approved landing strip.
This is Colin Anderson again on behalf of the petitioner. There's 3 layers of legal requirements that have to be complied with. Obviously, that's why we're before your body on the local county level. There's also the state level. The Illinois Aeronautics Act governs all types of aircraft, from ultralight to Cessnas to large commercial planes, and each have their own legal requirements that are being complied with here. We have notified the Illinois Aeronautics Department to get their permission to do this, that's one of the requirements. And then obviously there's federal aviation laws that are also being complied with. So all of them sort of have similar interplay and overlap, but each requires separate approval for Mr. Giordano to lawfully conduct any sort of flying of aircraft, and he is doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go to a vote, Brown speaking, before we go to a vote, just point of clarity, are we going to be voting on amending it to allow ultralights only and then voting?
I think the first vote is going to be on the amendment. So let's just do it, even if it's unclear.
So there'll be 2 votes.
Yeah, thank you. So let's call the roll on the vote to amend to restrict the usage of the landing strip to ultralights. Clerk, please call the roll.
Berman,
Berman, yes, on the amendment.
Brown,
Yes, on the amendment.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Iqbal,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Wojnicki,
Yes.
Braz,
Yes.
Caius,
Yes.
Martin.
Martin, yes. Motion carries. So the matter has been, the motion has been amended. Now on the motion as amended. Clerk, please call the roll.
Berman,
Berman, no.
Brown,
Brown, no.
Ford,
Ford,
yes.
Iqbal,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Wojnicki,
Yes.
Braz,
Yes.
Caius,
Yes.
Martin.
Martin, yes.
Yes.
Motion carries. Petition is approved. Before us next is petition 4587. Mr. Van Kerkhoff.
Thank you. Your next petition this morning is 4587 Kane Land Club LLC, rezoning from F District Farming to PUD Planned Unit Development. This is located in Aurora Township. You have to look way over to the right side of the slide there, and you can see the small area red. This is an area right on the county line on Liberty Street. It's in an area in the 2040 plan that is planned for commercial and employment. Here you see it on the zoning map. Everything hatched red is the city of Aurora. It is contiguous to the city of Aurora on the south side. It is in an area that has quite a bit of zoning for I industrial, and it's adjacent to that. Here it is on a map. You can see some of the industrial and commercial land uses that are to the north and to the west. And you can see on the county line in DuPage County, there's some townhouse development. Here it is a close-up. There is a portion of this property on the DuPage County side that has not really, the development has not changed from its earliest land uses. And this particular parcel is sort of a leftover piece on our side of the county line, which they are looking to rezone. Here's a close-up. You can see its adjacency to the precast yard to the west and north. Here's another close-up. You can see the existing structures. Here's a site plan of both parcels under consideration this morning is parcel 2, which is in Kane County. Here's sort of a bird's eye perspective of what they're proposing to do. They'd like to build a new building for their facility to be relocated from Kendall County up to this site. They would demolish the existing home, and they would have some limited parking for their employees. Here's sort of a more close-up detailed look at the site plan as they're proposing it. Staff recommended stipulations. Water Resources has stipulations regarding flooding and impervious area and what would be needed to be done. Could potentially have to go through the subdivision process if they were to subdivide it. Transportation has some stipulations regarding right-of-way and the new driveway, as well as the access width for the driveway. Kane County Health Department had a stipulation related to the well and septic, if they were to seal those and cap those, and if there's new construction, well and septic would need to be up to current codes. That would include an evaluation of whether or not they are close enough to municipal services to have to hook up to sewer and water, or whether they'd be eligible for a variance by the health department for that. And then I will also note on this one, we also have an objection from the city of Aurora, from their staff. They are not objecting to the redevelopment or use of the property. They just feel that the property would be best suited to be annexed into the city of Aurora and receive city of Aurora water and hook up to the sanitary system. It is the petitioner's a right to apply for the rezoning and development permits needed through the county, which they're electing to do. And I do believe they are online. They want to address that question as well. Staff recommend findings of fact that the rezoning would allow for redevelopment of this property for a business use, and that'd be consistent with the 2040 plan. Is not applicable for the Regional Planning Commission. Zoning Board of Appeals recommends approval with the recommended stipulations, and it's before you this morning.
Thank you. May we have a motion, please? Mr. Fries moves.
Ford seconds.
Mr. Ford seconds. Do we have comments or questions? Mr. Fries.
Yeah, looking at the site plan, it's pretty impressive. It's very low density, a lot of landscape screening, fence screening, and a pretty nice looking building that they've provided an example of. And of course, if you look at the adjacent usage, they're about as heavy as can be. Precast concrete plant right next door. So to me, it looks like a good proposal. My only question for Mark is, and I read through this twice, but I don't really understand what they do. Not that that matters, but I'd kind of like to know what exactly Kane Land LLC is.
Sure, I believe the petitioner is online, and I defer to them to answer that question if they'd be willing to do that.
Sure, this is Michael Bryant. Kane Land Club is just the legal property holding company for the property. The actual building and use would be by Air 802 Corporation. It's AIR 802. So we're a manufacturer, I guess you could say a niche manufacturer of wireless products. We make antennas, antenna cabling, and power over Ethernet products. So essentially, we do final assembly. Most of the parts we have made from various other companies in the US and around the world and brought in, and then we assemble them. And most of our shipments are shipped out by post office. They're relatively small items. So there's no pollution, no noise, essentially we'd be almost an invisible neighbor, I guess, to anybody around there. Our customers include the Department of Defense, private corporations, governments around the world. So we sell our wireless equipment even to the city of Aurora. I mean, you name it, they're probably a customer of ours.
I commend you on your site plan. Again, looking at the extremely heavy industrial uses around there, I think this will be appears to be something that I won't even mind living next door to. So good job on the site plan. And it looks like a very low impact manufacturing plant, and something that will really be visually exciting for the area and improvement.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, Bates, please.
Bates?
Speaking from Aurora, this looks like a good place for a good use.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, Ford.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I think I do know this area very well. I've actually been inside and all around the concrete plant. So it's a very high industrial area. This is very soft. It's a great spot. It's nice to bring job opportunities to a location of more of a technology, where we are heading to in society. So I really do support this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Madam Chair?
Dias?
Yes.
The second, Madam Chair has the floor right now.
Speaking of jobs, how many jobs will this bring to Kane County? This factory?
In the immediate term, right now, we're currently very low personnel. We're 2, and we expect to have 2 more as soon as we get the building up. One of the reasons I might add that we're highly interested in this property is it's in what's defined by the SBA as a hub zone. And a hub zone is basically an area which is economically distressed. So the government does set aside programs for hub zone companies. And one of the requirements is it's not just being in a hub zone physically, it's that you employ people from within the hub zone. So we would have to employ people who live within the area of Aurora, which is considered economically distressed, or part of this hub zone. So in the near term future, I don't see but adding 2 to 3 people, but long term, I can't, it's difficult to predict, essentially.
So those 2 to 3 people then would be hired specifically from the greater Aurora area within that zone?
That's correct.
And you will train them?
That's correct. Yes, we will.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Dias?
Mr. Cayos?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I it looks like a great plan, a great idea. I guess I don't understand the relationship between the city of Aurora and the county in that they are objecting. Can you add some clarification to that? More detail, someone?
I believe Mr. Van Kerkhoff addressed that in his presentation, and not to take the words from his
He mentioned
mouth. I
that
think it was because they want them to connect to municipal utilities, and the applicant doesn't feel that need at the present time.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Ford,
all
Thank
right.
you.
I'm sorry, Chris, does that answer your question?
Well, actually, I guess, but I thought maybe there might be a little more to the background on it. Like, why doesn't the applicant want to do that? Or
Berman?
Wait, Mr. Ford is the next in line.
Thank you. Actually, I think we're here just to prove the zoning because it's an unincorporated area, what makes it a part of Kane County responsibility as far as the zoning part. They still have to apply for a building permit, which that fight for them is with the city of Aurora. So that part right there is between the city and them.
No.
So they don't have to.
Unincorporated.
That's right, it's unincorporated, so that's not right. So I'm corrected. But so the idea of them having to have a septic tank versus water supply, a lot of it got to do with the size of what they putting up. So it doesn't really require for us to request them to have that water supply, or if they need a sprinkler system, anything like that. So if that's not required, there's no need for them to have to.
I
go
would
down
agree with
road.
that. The precipitating events are what is required to properly operate the property, and the applicant will make that call as it's developed. Mr. Berman.
Yeah, I think the reason Aurora had the opportunity to comment was because this is within a mile and a half. It's probably within a block and a half of Aurora, but it's within a mile and a half comment area.
That was my comment. I think every community wants to have anything that's within their mile and a half jurisdiction annexed to them for tax reasons. But other than that, and control.
It would be interesting to see what the fire department says, because that may be a challenge for the petitioner if the fire department says they want a sprinkler this building.
That could make the difference.
It's gonna, not something that is cheap to do on a well.
Well, to Mr. Ford's point, that's not the issue before us. And I think we should, if there are no further questions, we should call the vote. Is there anything else?
thank you.
Clerk, please call the vote.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Brown,
Brown, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Iqbal,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Wodnicki,
Yes.
Roz,
Yes.
Caius,
Caius, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
carries.
Item C.
Morning again. Thank you. You have before you a ordinance, which would be an ordinance amending Chapter 15 of the Kane County Code nuisances and property maintenance. This ordinance was presented last month to this committee, or the notion behind the ordinance regarding beekeeping, as well as the Agriculture Committee. It is also on the agenda of the Agriculture Committee on Thursday morning. In the meantime, at the Agriculture Committee last month, we had quite a number of beekeepers show up due to the article in the paper, and volunteer to assist staff with coming up with regulations that they felt were good for beekeepers and good for the county to address a nuisance level situations. And so we're very grateful to the beekeeping community. That resulted in the draft that you have in your packet this morning. I also attended the Kane County Farm Bureau board meeting last Thursday evening, and for their review and comment, and I believe they unanimously endorsed the what you have in front of you as well. So we're very grateful to our beekeeping community, and have this before you this morning. It basically amends the existing ordinance under the section of animals and infestations. It also adds the appropriate definitions to the ordinance for beekeeping terms. And and then basically adds parameters in terms of what things need to be in place, or the county would be basically declaring it a nuisance situation. Probably the key component of it is the density relative to lot size. And this is where the beekeepers were a huge help in combining some of the best practices around the country for a maximum number of hives recommended on a permanent basis, and then what's defined as temporary hives as a way of swarm control. And this is a key component, because usually that's, if we do get a call, that's what people are concerned about. Their neighbor is doing beekeeping, and maybe they observe a swarm, and it can be disturbing. So the best way to control that, as well as a benefit to the beekeepers to be able to continue supporting our bee population, is to have temporary hives in place during the right time of season for those swarms to move to and expand the colony that way. So those are all part of this as well. And then also on the part of the ordinance that generally refers to exemptions to the entire chapter, adding some language that would make sure that that beekeeping was not necessarily exempted from all of the same conditions that under that exemption. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or ask that you approve this and move it on to agriculture and the full board.
Thank you. Before we entertain a motion, I just want to volunteer that it's particularly pleasing for me that we work with the people that actually know the subject very well, and I compliment the staff for doing that. So may we have a motion, please?
Fraz moves.
Fraz moves, Mr. Iqbal seconds. Mr. Fraz is the first question.
I agree with you on the having the input from the experts. I think it was fun to listen to them and realize, what we didn't know, and they did, and we took it all into account. And I also want to compliment staff on making this sort of somewhat of a passive enforcement opportunity. But, they needed to have something to work with if an event happens, but I don't think we're going to be out patrolling beehives. So I like the passive aspect of it also. So
I would imagine that conversation at Ag was really buzzing.
Yeah.
Mr. Kenyon, I think you had your hand raised.
I would
Okay.
have moved it or seconded. I'm in favor of this.
Anybody else? Clerk, please call the roll.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Brown,
Brown, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Iqbal, Kenyon,
Yes.
Wodnicki,
Yes.
Fraz,
yes.
Caius,
Yes.
Martin.
Martin, yes.
Carries.
Motion carries. It'll now go to agriculture, is that right?
Yes, we'll go to agriculture.
Oh, it's been there.
Thursday.
Okay, I thought I heard you say that. Anyway,
Plant
we'll go
planning.
for approval. Planning and special projects.
Okay, as usual, you have a staff report from our planning division. Most of these items are reported to other committees, but we consolidate them here for your review since our department reports to the development committee. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Otherwise, request that you put it on file at the end of the meeting.
Are there any questions of Mr. Van Kerkhoff? Hearing none, thank you for your report. I believe we have a land cash report. Ms. Walling?
That's correct. Thank you. We have our annual report for our land cash for the year 2021. The amounts that were collected are included in that report for your review. This is the first full year that we've been under the new land cash ordinance and have had great success with it. It definitely relieved a lot of the paperwork burden for our parks and our schools. And the funding is going directly to them as opposed to going through the county's finances. So we've received a lot of positive feedback about the new land cash ordinance and are happy to report it's going very well. Most of the numbers that you see above are the meets and bounds lots. Most of them are not the subdivisions, and these were an area of huge miss on the previous ordinance. And so we're seeing those numbers come to fruition as we see more meets and bounds lots and smaller subdivisions. So it's on in the packet. We'd ask you to replace or place it on file, and I am here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Ms. Walnick? Hearing none. Thank you. Environmental Resources, do we have anything? Nothing? Mr. Berger, do we have anything from you?
Good morning, Chairman Martin. We do not have any items for you today.
Thank you. Then moving to new business, the first item is the two-year planning document for Kane County Development Committee.
I can jump in here. Madam Chair had asked us all as directors to put together a two-year planning document for each committee. Because of the extent of our activities not being as in detail as like KDOT, for example, we selected to do a memo written by Director Van Kerkhoff, Director Berger, and myself for your review, and that's included in your packet. I would look to the chairperson, Martin, to ask if you would like us to go through each section in detail for the committee, or how you would like to proceed.
I think a brief discussion of each section would be worthwhile.
I will turn it over to Ms. Director Van Kerkhoff then.
Okay, good morning. Yeah, the first part of this section is for Development and Community Services Department. Under our two divisions, Building and Zoning, aside from our usual work of processing applications and petitions, we are implementing the new building codes, which were adopted effective January 1st. That's going very well. Particularly some of the training opportunities we're able to take advantage of online in a very cost-effective way for our entire team. We also are completing testing and implementing our improvements to our permitting system, which will include a enhanced online portal for even better access for our customers. We also will continue to draft and recommend amendments to the zoning ordinance and other ordinances like we did for the beekeeping that are responsive to community needs. We're particularly looking at reviewing the sections for agriculture as they relate to our local foods, produce stands and other agricultural sales and agritourism. And then in terms of being responsive to community needs, things pop up from time to time. We've had a question brought up by a board member about fence heights. We've had a question brought up about the size and design of accessory structures in areas that are contiguous to municipalities. So we're able to take a look at a number of those items and invite, board members, if there's anything in particular that you would like us to take a look at as a staff. Be happy to do that. Other than that, under Planning and Special Projects Division, continues to work with the other committees. And I also just wanted to note that we have a multi-department planning team of including Environmental Water Resources, KDOT, and Health Department that meets monthly to look at planning issues that are cross-cutting across our various planning activities, and maybe in this year looking to address some of the emerging issues that are coming up in the county and using that as a way to engage our other planning partners, namely our municipalities. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or you can move on to Director Walnick.
Questions of Mr. Van Kerkhoff?
Raz has a quick comment. I'm just curious, Mark, I know you reported to us recently on the, returning to opening the fourth floor offices and so forth. So I don't know if that should be included in this or not, but I'm just curious how that's going, and at what point do you think we'll be fully open, or if we're going to keep some remote stuff, what percentage of your operations would be remote versus in person?
Sure. So we were fully open in November with regular business hours, and we continue to do so even during the last surge that we had in cases. For regular business hours, 8:30 to 4:30. We are continuing to work in a hybrid fashion with people sort of rotating in and out of the office, working remotely and working in person to service our customers that have come in. I think last month I reported we've had about over 40 walk-in customers for building and zoning issues that we've been able to service in person. So I hope that addresses your question, but we continue to plan on continuing to remain open with regular business hours and staff to service people who walk in.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Thank you. Under subdivisions, we continue to mark up the subdivision ordinance as we review it for consistency with the zoning ordinance and developments as they come through. So that will eventually be coming back to this committee, likely within this 2-year planning period. We're also looking to revise the definition of the minor subdivision because it does usually not involve the stormwater ordinance. And that would also include revising and reducing the fees for processing a 2-lot subdivision. We're also looking to clarify the variances and adjustments. And we had the fees for subdivisions reviewed by MGT Consulting, and we'll be looking to increase some of those fees. Under water resources, the main program that reports to this committee under there is our cost share drainage program. We continue to rely heavily on the Grand Victoria Riverboat Foundation for all the services under that program. So we are, as we have been in the past, looking for additional resources for funding for our different HOAs and our unincorporated residents that are experiencing severe drainage issues. One of those options is to increase the number of special service areas that are offered in our unincorporated areas to improve the ability of homeowners associations and residents in unincorporated subdivisions to maintain their own drainage and provide a loaning mechanism to those residents that would allow them to complete larger drainage projects. We're also improving our GIS mapping of drain tiles and other drainage features in the county to help residents identify areas where they might potentially have drainage issues or if they're installing any kind of new utility to be aware of drain tiles that might exist. Under the floodplain and wetlands section, we continue to work with our residents who have substantially damaged homes. One of the largest challenges that we have had, and this is a federal requirement to stay in the National Floodplain Insurance Program, is that homes that are substantially damaged are required to either be demolished, elevated, or renovated to meet the standards. Many times the resident is, however, willing to demolish the home. And we can use federal funds to buy them out. However, we are often at a disadvantage in that the county does not accept the property once that buyout occurs. And so many municipalities will take ownership of that property. So having a government entity that's able to take ownership of those properties would largely improve our ability to process these buyouts. We also have about 100 miles of stream channel in Kane County where there is no floodplain elevation. So structures being built adjacent to these floodplains are heavily scrutinized and require engineering that establishes that base flood elevation. And because we are in such an urbanized area, this is a rarity. So increasing our floodplain awareness as well as education, as well as the technical side of things is very important to our residents. Our wetland mapping is over 20 years old. There's quite a few errors in that mapping, and we're utilizing this old data to help inform residents as to potential developments on their property or restrictions on their property. So updating those maps is critical to be providing residents with the best available information. And I'll turn it over to Mr. or unless there's any questions.
I have one comment. Jody and I have had at least one brief conversation. I think one of the good things this county does is to provide the mechanism for dealing with drainage issues. The coordination and all of the services that we provide. The problem is the money that it takes to deal with this. And we always just say, and we rely on the riverboat. And I look upon the riverboat as being extremely and more and more unreliable as we place increasing demands on a diminishing resource. So what I would hope we could work on over the next year or two as a vehicle for putting together in some manner, some lump of cash, whether it's a bond issue or whatever else, and a program where the homeowners still pay for the drainage remediation, and we still coordinate it, but we've got in effect the money to lend or make money available, and we would be paid back. My comment, the brush is so broad, it's bigger than this room, so I don't intend to, this is not a scientific comment, but I'd like to have a pool of resources available to give comfort to the Water Resources Department that they can in fact continue to coordinate, and to the benefit of the people in the county, some real assistance in dealing with these issues, because we've got a number of areas, as all counties do, with it, where, if you're developed in the 50s and 60s, chances are your engineering was either non-existent or inadequate. And we need to provide a vehicle for doing that. Thank you all. Mr. Berger.
Yes, good morning. At the very end of your packet, you'll see a note that we added regarding our Housing and Community Development Consolidated Plan. Our Community Development Division, as you know, implements a number of initiatives focused on addressing housing needs, neighborhood improvements such as infrastructure and park improvements, as well as a number of initiatives aimed at addressing homelessness in Kane County. In order to participate in various federally funded programs, mostly available through the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, we do prepare and submit a 5-year Housing and Community Development Consolidated Plan. That plan governs the use of those funds and directs our activities over the 5-year planning horizon. And we last prepared a 5-year plan in 2020 and anticipate beginning to prepare a new plan in 2024 for submission to the federal government in 2025. So in a nutshell, that consolidated plan governs and establishes the priorities for our various federally funded programs.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments of Mr. Berger? Hearing none. I'd like to volunteer one additional new business item, and that is we've had continuing discussion, I think, most recently at the last board meeting, about the need to amend our procedural ordinances to have committee assignments properly described and codified. And to that point, our 3 department heads, Mr. Berger, Mr. Van Kerkhoff, and Ms. Wolnick, have just about completed a draft of that description, which they're going to refine. And I believe the plan would be that it gets distributed to us in anticipation of our discussing that matter at the next monthly meeting. So it's moving forward, and I feel it's important to have the leadership of our department heads, and it's happening. So thank you all. I can't look at Mr. Berger, I guess, but
May I ask a question, please?
You may.
This is for Scott. Scott, the housing plan that you just referenced, are you also including housing affordability in that plan?
Yes, that is one of the primary focuses of the program. Obviously, our funding comes from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, so naturally, housing is a primary focus.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other new business? May we have a motion, please, to place reports on file?
Ford
Mr.
moves.
Ford moves, Ms. Winnicki seconds. Clerk, please call the roll.
Byrne,
Yes.
Brown,
Brown, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Iqbal,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Winnicki,
Yes.
Roz,
Yes.
Caius. Caius. Martin.
Martin, yes. Motion carries. I have no knowledge of an executive session being necessary, so I will entertain Mr. Kenyon's motion
We
to
adjourn and get
adjourn.
out in the world.
And who seconds that? Dr. Iqbal seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is adjourned at 11:32. I